So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the panel discussion, European Information Integrity, Lessons from the War in Ukraine for European Security. My name is Marietje. I am the president of Youth Atlantic Treaty Association, YATA Germany, and I'm very much looking forward to this wonderful panel. This event is organized by Friedrich Naumann Foundation, Thomas Della Foundation, and Ukrainian Free University. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say a few words about Ukrainian Free University because this is very extraordinary university. So, European Free University founded 1921 in exile in Vienna and has been based in Munich since 1945. So last year they celebrated their 80th ceremony and anniversary. So maybe a huge applause for them at this place. And of course, a few words about Friedrich Naumann Foundation and Thomas Della Foundation. Both of them are organizing events supporting liberal values, human rights, and democratic order. So Friedrich Naumann Foundation works in overall in this world, and Thomas Della Foundation works here in Bayern. What we are talking about today, this is the huge topic for European security. And this is a huge topic for Ukrainian security. Across the continent, we are witnessing an unprecedented wave of state-sponsored propaganda, large-scale disinformation, and persistent cyber attacks targeting both critical infrastructure and public trust. So I very much looking forward, as I told you at the beginning, to this wonderful panel. And I would like to introduce all our speakers to you. But before doing so, I would like to welcome and thank some special guests here. I would like to start with Larissa Ditkovska, Rector, the University, Ukrainian Free University Rector, please applause. Dmytro Shevchenko, Chancellor of Ukrainian Free University. Thomas Schaake, President, Thomas Della Foundation. Applause for you. As well as Dr. Wolfgang Heubisch, former state minister and member of board of the Thomas Della Foundation and supervisory board of Ukrainian Free University. The applause for you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest too. He is unfortunately not here, but digitally with us. So I would like to start introducing to you Dr. HELMUT BRANDSTÄTTER, member of the European Parliament from Austria and Committee on Foreign Affairs, part of Renew Europe. Dr. Brandstätter is working on European policy to counter hybrid threats and disinformation. So maybe a huge applause for him too. Thank you. The second speaker is HALYNA MYKHAILIUK, member of Verkhovna Rada and representative of the President Zelensky in the parliament. So she is bringing first-hand experiences from Ukraine in defending democratic resilience. Thank you for joining us today. Our third speaker is Marietje Schaake, non-resident fellow of Stanford's Cyber Policy Center and Institute of Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. Ms. Schaake is former member of European Parliament and expert on digital freedom and technology policy. So huge applause for you. And last but not least, we have with us Dr. Evgenia Gaver, Ukrainian foreign policy expert, non-resident senior fellow at Atlantic Council, specializing in European security architecture, deterrence, and hybrid sub-conventional warfare. This applause is for you. And let's start. Let's start and discuss how we can strengthen European democratic resilience and what we can learn from Ukrainian experience. So I would like to start with you, Dr. Gaber. Let's try to make an overview on the European security architecture, where we are now, and beyond conventional military force. Which forms of hybrid or sub-conventional warfare is Russia deploying? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam, and good evening to you all. Thank you for being here. It's really a great privilege and honor to be here on this panel. I will probably start by saying that I myself come from Odessa, and I'm a Ukraine-based expert. So when I say that I have been specializing in Russian hybrid warfare and informational warfare for 40 years, it does not necessarily mean that I'm 60 plus and that I have studied it for 40 years. It just means that I have been exposed to the Russian information operations and hybrid warfare for years and years. Because when you are part of the so-called Ruski Mir, or Novorossiya, or whatever you may call it, living in a city which is traditionally perceived as a Russian-speaking city, which is not necessarily the case and which does not necessarily translate into some political preferences, that's a very specific experience, I must say. But today I would probably, I was thinking of what to say, and of course I could have started by saying that Russia escalates horizontally, that Russia has increased its sabotage acts from arsons and assassinations to cyber attacks and drone incursions and all type of malign actions in Europe at least 5-6 times since 2023, and especially in 2025, if you look at any of the reports, IISS, Carnegie Endowment, anything, you would see this, not the vertical escalation necessarily, so it's mainly talks about nuclear, but horizontally it's all over the places, it's across Europe. But then it's a never-ending story, and it's basically enjoying the problem, which I would not like to do. And I would like to talk a bit about solutions to what can be done. I think that's really important, especially as we're talking about the lessons from Ukraine. So my first point would be that you need to know your adversary, and whether we want to call Russia a competitor, rival, an adversary, I believe it will be different in different parts of Europe, because the threat perception is obviously different in Spain or Portugal and somewhere in Lithuania or Poland. But whatever you call it, you need to know your adversary. And the first thing to know about Russian way of war is a quote of Gerasimov, not Gerasimov doctrine per se, but one of his earlier articles, when he said that the main domain and the main battlefield is human psyche and is information domain. It's not about the land, cyber, sea, air domains as it is in the West. So if you look at the NATO doctrine and you look through it, you would see this huge focus on physical domains and on real capabilities. In the Russian case, it's completely different. It's not about capabilities per se, it's about projection of their capabilities, it's about perception management, it's about reflexive control, it's about shaping the strategic environment so that basically you make your enemies, in their case, Russia obviously calls the West as an enemy, you make your enemy make a decision that would be self-defeating and that would be the one favorable for Russia. So we can talk about propaganda and disinformation and what is more important, pre-bunking or debunking or some other things, but I do believe it's really important to start with this foundational difference of the Western thinking who needs to control narratives when we can control airspace type of thinking, and then the Russian way of thinking, saying in a very, sorry, in a very traditional hybrid Sun Tzu type of thing, if you can overtake a country without actually rolling your tanks into it, then you just go for it. It's all about disunity, it's all about testing solidarity, it's all about testing the vulnerabilities of your adversaries, and as they say, look at where your vulnerabilities are and you will see FSB guys there. So that's exactly the thing, and I think this is where our Western allies and partners should probably learn some lessons from Ukraine. And coming from this, my second point would be that very often Russia's information campaigns and propaganda is not that much about some specific truth or trying to form, a distorted reality of truth. It's basically about influencing your emotions, your perceptions. So in this trilateral thing of logos, ethos, and pathos, it's not about logos, it's not about some rational things. It's also not about ethos because there is nothing ethical in what the Russians are doing, but it's basically about pathos. How you feel, it's about your fears, it's about your traumas, it's about your collective memories. So because I work a lot with different partners, with German friends, with American friends, the moment there is the N word in the room, nuclear, it's a paralysis. You don't need to invest too much money in propaganda or something. The moment Russia starts nuclear saber rattling, it's gone. It's not about the European economy that actually dwarfs the Russian economy. It's not about the military capabilities. It's not about rational assessment of who can do what. It's about a paralysis because whatever happens, don't drag us into the Third World War and the nuclear war. And then, of course, all this discussion about the red lines, etc. And when you look at what Ukraine has done, we have, sunk Moscow cruiser in the first days of the war, invaded Kursk region of Russia, have carried out a very successful Operation Spiderweb, basically destroying 1/3 of strategic bombers, which is part of the Russian nuclear triad. We have destroyed 1/3 of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. We have carried out multiple attacks on their facilities in Crimea and other regions which were said to be super sacred for Russia. Nothing happened except for the escalatory rhetoric about the use of the nuclear weapons. And this, I think, is where we can do more as Europe, just looking into what the Russians are really doing and not what the Russians are saying. And the third point, very quickly, and I want to be somehow provocative here and maybe have this for a broader discussion afterwards. When we are talking about deterrence, obviously it's about capabilities, but it's also about signaling and communication, right? And we're talking about deterrence, it can be deterrence by denial. So you deny your adversary a chance to either advance on the ground or in the air domain, whatever domain. But it's also, it can be deterrence by punishment or deterrence by cost imposition. So you don't stay on the defensive side. You also go on the offensive. And that's what we've seen during the Cold War era, right? So when I have all these conversations about what can be done about Russia and how to deter Russia, you can't deter Russia always reacting. You can't deter Russia always trying to catching up what the Russia is doing when Russia is setting the agenda for what we're doing. And we're stuck in this framework of trying to find the way out of what Russia has prepared for us. And I think this is fundamentally and essentially a very weak position to be in. So my recommendation, one of the lessons again learned from Ukraine, would be to set the agenda for Russia. It does not necessarily mean, though it's not excluded, that our European partners should go for the deep strikes inside the Russian territory to actually destroy their capabilities to fuel their budget and their war machine with energy, infrastructure, etc. But it does mean that in the cyber domain specifically, offensive operations in the cyber domain can be quite effective. In the information domain, shaping public opinion, creating points of pressure for Russia, that could be very effective. Creating problems for Russia and actually making them take these self-defeating decisions in a very difficult dilemmas, I would say is the way to go forward. Not necessarily only to build resilience, which is very important. Whole of society approach, resilience, information security is critically important, but also being proactive in strengthening NATO's cognitive posture, in being more effective and active in how we shape the strategic environment for our adversaries, I think this is something to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a very much Ukrainian voice here with us, so I would like to ask you, what's Ukraine facing in terms of hybrid warfare? Please share with us your experience of Ukraine.
I'm very much happy and grateful to be here today and to see that the topic of our panel disturbs not only Ukraine but European Union member states as well. I just arrived today in the morning driving from Kiev because this week, the recent week, was a plenary week for Ukrainian Parliament. And in my expressions, I might be sometimes not diplomatic, if I may, because, you know, the reality is that Ukraine is living through now, while we have minus 23 degrees below zero, we have in Kiev electricity 2-3 hours per day only because of constant bombing. And if you have heard today the speech of my president during the Munich Security Conference, and he was referring to the recent bombing of Kiev that happened last Wednesday night, early morning of Thursday. So I was in Kiev actually that Thursday morning and experienced by myself, let's say, because the energy grid that they were targeting is just 1.5 kilometers away from my house, and the ballistics came earlier than the air alert. So that's why, you know, I'm just with a, let's say here, fresh Ukrainian, let's say, atmosphere. That's why I'll be very much direct, straightforward, and honest in this discussion. I think that that is what's valuable here, to be honest. Actually, current war that we face in Ukraine cannot be compared to any other war that the world has ever faced with. Because you know that this is modern warfare, drone war, in combination of, you know, number of attacks. And this war doesn't have any borders. There are like no, it's not only about geography, but it's also about, what is about public trust. It's about different information campaigns. These are just, it can start not just from the invasion to your territory, but just from small spam emails, then cyber attacks on different governmental organizations, then drones that crossing the borders in some airports, not only in Ukraine, but also in Berlin and other European Union member states. So Russia, they always, by small, these kind of pushes, they just check what will be the reaction, if it will be allowed, and what will be the next step. Are they going to be punishment, or the world just will be deeply concerned and waiting for the new step from them? So that's why in Ukraine we do believe that they will not stop in Ukraine Just before coming here, I was on Ukrainian lunch in Munich Security Conference, and there we had prisoners of war who were in captivity and who are released now. And they were telling about their impressions and memories from the period when they were in Russian prisons. And they were telling us that the Russian colonels who were beating them and torturing them, they were telling, we will not stop only in Poland and Baltics, come on, like we are waiting for the Putin's word to say go forward, and we'll do it without any hesitation. So that's why we in Ukraine, we do our best to resist, to innovate. When we didn't have a supplementary package from US a couple of years ago, we invented actually that we can use drones and put explosives there, and this is how this development, when you don't have weapons, you introduce other ways, the cheaper ones, the more quicker ones. And I should say that these developments, they are not kind of, planned in advance in terms that during the wartime we develop, we innovate and advance on different levels. It's not that we planned it a number of years ago, there was strategic planning, but we do our best to survive every single day. That's why when today my president was asked, so what's about your half-a-year planning about peace plan, victory, etc., and he told like, well, let's plan for tomorrow and day after tomorrow. This is actually the realities of Ukraine. Sometimes you don't know if tomorrow will come, because if you will be bombed this night, next night, well, we do hope that that actually this victorious, peaceful time will come to Ukraine. We have no other option to survive. Ukrainians, we are very much resilient, and I should say that despite the difficulties that Ukrainian citizens have these days, when we talk about no electricity, that means no warm water, sometimes no telephone connection, and a number of, I live on 22nd floor. So for me, just going up and down, I'm climbing by myself and going to the business trip with a luggage, this is a proper planning, kind of how I was thinking to throw it from the balcony immediately, or so yeah. So, but Ukrainians, we do not protest on the streets that we are not happy because there is no electricity. We understand that there is no electricity because Russia bombs us, and that we should share. When I have 2 hours of my electricity, my neighbors, they don't have, in neighboring houses, when they have, so we have this kind of huge trust actually to the government, and to understand the government does its best actually to improve the situation. But again, there are limits of we have limits of human resources in Ukraine. Because Ukrainians, we are ending. We are a small nation compared to Russia. We cannot afford ourselves to lose as many soldiers as they do. So we cannot afford ourselves a long war because we are a small nation in population, and we value every single life of Ukrainian and internationals who decided to defend Ukrainian interests in this war. So that's why I urge everyone in Europe, outside of Ukraine, time is highly important. That's why help Ukraine, learn from Ukraine, and I do hope that one day we can actually celebrate the victorious peace of Ukraine together.
Thank you so much. Many thanks. And now let's hear the European perspective on our topic. Dr. Brandstätter, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thanks very much. It's very interesting.
Amazing, thank you. So I would like to ask you, how would you describe the challenges in terms of hybrid warfare European Union is facing with, and what is the answer of European Union? How do you try to counteract this kind of huge warfare against European Union?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm always happy to be a member or be active with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. And that's my first point, it's about freedom. And that which makes me sad when I travel around Europe and what I listen to people and when I listen also to the social media. Many people in Western Europe do not understand that Ukraine is fighting for freedom. And I was quite often during the war in Ukraine, and the sentence I heard the most in different areas was, "We do not want to live as Putin's slaves." And that's what I tell people then when I come back to Europe. And that's, I'm the experienced one here, in order not to say the old one, but it was already then spoken about the Cold War. I remember the times of the 1980s, and I want to explain what I see the big difference. In the 1980s, we had discussions in Western Europe about everything in the different parties. But one thing was for sure, that all 99% were convinced that we are living in the better side of Europe, that we were lucky to live in Western Europe, that we had all the chances. And, there were 1% communists probably, and they said the life in Moscow or in Soviet Union would be better, but it was really a very small minority. Today, the society is really split, and the right-wing populists were very, very successful in splitting the society. And what's happening now is that many people say, Putin is not the bad guy. Putin is the poor guy because NATO is so strong. And so he has to defend his people. It's the Ukrainians who started the war. Just look at it. Whenever I post something, and Facebook at this moment is the worst, by the way. Whenever I post something and you see it from this Petersburg troll Fabrik to the ADF, AfD, and FPÖ, the right-wing parties here, they always say, no, it's the Ukrainians' fault. So this is the really challenge that we have to explain to the Europeans what's happening right now. And that Ukraine is also defending us, because if Putin took Ukraine, he would not stop there. And the difference is, and now I come to the propaganda, the difference is that Putin and his puppets here, as I call them, and I wrote even a book about it, Putin, Trump and their puppets, Putin and their puppets, they have a very clear, very easy story. They say there could be peace, you could have the cheap gas again, and everything would be fine in Europe, just give me Ukraine. And people here say, yeah, why not? Our story is very complicated. It could be also quite easy if we explain, no, it's about the freedom of people in Ukraine. But we are so complicated, and we say, no, we should do this and we should do that. And then Mr. Merz said, yeah, he would give more weapons to Ukraine. Now he doesn't do it. So, and then people here say, it's cold in Western Europe as well. Why do we give all the money to Ukraine? And again, we had it in the European Parliament last week, when we decided on 90 billions. And we said, okay, those 90 billions for Ukraine, at the end, the Russians have to pay it. And here the right-wing people again came on, no, that's not possible. It's the Russian money. So you see, there is a split in the Western society, and that what it makes so difficult for us to bring people together again, and also to convince them that what Putin is doing is a genocide. I mean, this Vladimir Dugin said it. He said Ukrainians came out of the cellar or whatever, and it's okay to kill them. That are Putin's people. Listen to Soloviev. We should explain much better what they are saying. They say, are we going to bomb first Berlin or London, or is it Paris? And there will be the flag in Berlin, the Russian flag in Berlin again. So they really are incredibly aggressive, but people in Western Europe do not understand it yet, and we are not good enough to explain it.
Applause, maybe more than deserved. My next question goes to you, Ms. Schaake, and maybe everyone agrees that technological change and artificial intelligence makes it easier to just to have these huge numbers of posts, they are actually fake, and to just have this huge informational warfare coming from Russia to European Union, to Ukraine. So I would like to ask you, how is technological change transforming the informational ecosystem, and what risks does this create for democracies and democratic resilience in general?
Well, thank you so much. I'm really humbled to be here and so inspired by your stories from really the front lines. And the fact that you drove for 2 hours to be here. Sorry, did I say hours? I meant to say days. I know, days. Says so much, you know, about your commitments and the many things we can learn from Ukrainians. Not only about disinformation, and I wish we learned a lot more, but also about courage, about resilience. As you said, I think it's one of the most important words. It's incredible how people can sustain these relentless attacks on all levels that have gone on for so long. The loss of life, the loss of opportunity, the loss of, you know, comfort, the loss of friends, family, the loss of territory, which I hope can be reversed. But it is incredible. And you know, I think there are so many lessons to be learned also about optimistic things that we can learn. I often cite the example of Ukraine being now a producer of high-tech defense technology, which who would have thought? You know, if somebody would have said, even 4 years ago at the Munich Security Conference, this is where Ukraine is going to be, people would have probably called me crazy. Recall that it's exactly 4 years ago that all of this attacks started, because I remember talking to the president's aides who had shopping bags with gifts for their children in their hands. And the tensions were rising so much 4 years ago that there were people who, I mean, it was not a joke, but who were commenting how many bags did President Zelensky pack? In other words, was he planning on staying? And of course he didn't stay, because he also shows us what it means to have courage. And I think, you know, if we could only have a fraction of the courage that Ukrainians have here in Europe, we would be in a much better place. And now that brings me to the technological question. So I don't want to talk too much about the AI aspect, only because, yes, it changes everything. It can change defense, it can change offense, and everything in between. But what I think we need to really understand is how important the platforms still are for the spread of any kind of information, including disinformation and all kinds of attacks on the fabric of our society, on the things we believe about ourselves and the world, about Russia and Ukraine, about freedom and war, about risk. And the problem that we have now entered into is that these platforms are run by people who, on the one hand, have, for a long time, have had profit as a key driver, where the needs to make profit are not always aligned with the needs to run a democratic debate, a resilient debate, to stand up to attack. So that's one sort of ongoing challenge that we have. But on top of that, we now see the CEOs of the most important tech companies siding with an American administration that is pro-Russian, anti-European, and anti-democratic, and therefore anti-Ukrainian. And why are we all spending our time at the platforms of propaganda? We have to really understand much better how these platforms are the vehicle for spreading information and disinformation. And it is naive to think, and the Ukrainians can teach us, that this is a place where we can be entertained, where we can get information, where we can hang out with our friends. It is not about efficiency, and certainly not about efficiency only. It is not about entertainment, and certainly not about entertainment only. And so I think we have to really understand that there's an ecosystem of interests that facilitate what the KGB and FSB have professionalized in ways that Europeans are certainly naive about, but that the vehicles in order to make that happen are part of every one of our lives. And we really have to connect the dots between the broader geopolitical developments that put Europe in a bind from the East and the West, and that will also unleash more disinformation on our populations, which will have impact on the war in Ukraine, but which will have impact on a whole lot more, on an appreciation for freedom. I was very happy to hear MEP Brandstätter mentioning that, and of course, this is what the Friedrich Naumann Stiftung is all about. But we do not, collectively, do not understand what is at stake, and we do not know how we can be resilient. I think that that is a very dire diagnosis of where the majority of EU Europeans are. And so let this event not only inform us and inspire us, but also move us to action. Because if we do not ourselves begin to change our understanding and our resilience, we will be unnecessarily vulnerable for the many ways in which there are now attacks coming at us that are aiming to, unravel the fabric of our free societies. And if that works, we will be a weaker partner vis-a-vis Ukraine, and we will really, be sort of lost on many levels. So I think what we should really start doing is to do the sort of forensics that you shared, really understand what's happening, but not stop at the methodology, but continue at the platforms and continue at the sort of unholy alliance between all kinds of already very powerful players in the tech space, in the political space, that are now, working together, or at least facilitating each other towards the picking apart of our European free societies.
Thank you so much. Dr. Gaber, would you also say that Europeans do not know how to be resilient?
Well, because I'm from Ukraine and I'm an optimist, as well decided, and for the Ukrainians, I think the glass is always half full rather than half empty. I will try to reframe your question and answer it differently. By the way, I'm just coming from one of the closed panel discussions in the Munich Security Conference, and it was very funny when one of the very top-level European leaders told me, when I admire your president, so when we met with him and I had to tell him really, really bad news that I've got from a different negotiation round, and we sat at the table and I said, well, President, I'm afraid, and then he had this empty glass, I'm afraid that my glass for you today is empty. And then President Zelensky took a bottle of water and said, let me just pour a bit of water in your glass. So that's basically how Ukrainians are approaching this. I do believe that there are many things that have been touched upon that European partners and allies can learn from Ukraine, from the platforms, as you said, from the large language models. So when you're talking to ChatGPT, or we're talking to Gemini or whatever, and you can literally feel how the Russian narratives are being infiltrated in that, in the wording which is used, in the responses it gives, and going up to this general narrative that Russians are promoting. The war in Ukraine is lost, Ukraine has been defeated, and then you talk to someone in Europe and they look at you and they say, we're really sorry, but there is nothing for Ukraine to do at this point of time. The Russians have advanced and they keep advancing and they keep advancing, and they unfortunately militarily are winning this war. And then you just ask a question like, what led you think like that? Yeah, but they have taken this and that, and the city of Kupiansk, which was reported 4 times as, taken over by the Russians, and then Zelensky went there and took a video showing the Ukrainian presence in the city. And then you just ask a question, like, there is Donetsk region of Ukraine, still partial under the Ukrainian control, and the Russians could not take over control since 2014 over the region of Donetsk, let alone whole of Ukraine. And when you compare it to the Second World War and the progress that the Soviets did back then and what's happening right now, and this only full-scale invasion since 2022 is already longer than the Second World War, you are in a different, mental reality. So to your point, what Europe can learn from us, one is resilience, the second thing is optimism, definitely, the sense of humor. When you mock your adversary, it's difficult to talk about nuclear attack in Ukraine, for example, because we just don't care. I mean, either it's missile, either it's, a drone, whether you potentially can be killed by Oreshnik or by nuclear, we we don't care. I mean, we should go on and fight. And that's why most of these narratives, they are addressed at the maybe less resilient, less prepared Western audiences. But it's also about telling the story. It's also about communicating. I really like this point about the frozen assets, because we were just discussing this. So how we are telling our story, when I say we, I mean Europeans, and how Russians are saying. Russians are saying, look, it's not about freedom, rules-based international order, democracy, whatever. It's about cheap gas. It's about your salaries. It's about welfare. It's about your economic stability. We just need to have this war over, and then Europe will be back on track again. And then when we're talking about the frozen assets, it's all discussions about legal frameworks and the instability on the markets, and whether Belgium and Euroclear can afford doing this, or we should create a fund for this and that. This is not what the citizens of European countries care about. If you say, look, there is a price to be paid for this war, unfortunately, and there are two options. Either we pay it with your taxpayers' money, because we need to sustain Ukraine, otherwise Russia will be in Europe. So it's either your money or it's Russian money that we have as frozen assets in our European banks. What do you think your European citizens would say? They would not probably discuss, well, it's not fair and legal to take Russian money. They will say, no way we're paying our taxpayers' money for the destruction that Russia has caused in Ukraine. So I think there is something to learn from this, you know, to be resilient to Russia, but also not to be afraid, and to your point, to have this courage to actually go a bit on pushing the lines and say, well, you know, maybe sometimes we just need to be tougher on Russia and explain it in a very basic language to our citizens.
Thank you so much. So we are actually discussing what Europe can learn from Ukraine, but the war started 2022. So do you think we already learned something from you?
I might correct you, the war started in 2014.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. And maybe at this point, I would like to underline it too, that as half Georgian, the aggression of Russia started 28. So it's not new for many countries on the world how aggressive Russia is. Please.
When I was listening to my colleagues on the panel, I was remembering the event here in amerikahaus that I participated in. I was also a speaker in summer 2022, the Young Munich Security Conference leaders. I was holding the event, and some representatives from Western European Union member states, they told on the panel that they are not ready to give away their bourgeois comfort for the security of Ukraine. I mean, to pay more because, you know, life comfort, bourgeois comfort, this is direct quotation, is very much important for Europeans. And, you know, in the Parliament of Ukraine, I'm in charge in the Law Enforcement Committee on international relations, and I'm also delegate from Ukrainian Parliament to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So I have an opportunity always to be in contact with my colleagues, members of the Parliament in European Union, worldwide, and NATO member states especially, and visit different NATO bases and to see their preparation mode, let's say. And to tell the truth, when I was visiting recently one of the NATO bases, military bases in Europe, and I saw how much theoretical is their preparation, like theory about theory, like planning about planning for the 10 years, 15 years time, and learning theoretically the experience from Ukraine, theoretically. And I was like thinking, guys, he will not make it if he will invade you, definitely. And like, you know, those men, they were like very nice uniform, brand new, NATO, you know, very much equipped, but very much theoretical. You know, my colleagues here on the panel were mentioning here a number of times resilience and this kind of special feature of the character of Ukrainians. When I was having a visit to the parliament of one of the European Union member states, I will not name the country, you will understand why. And we were having discussion between the MPs, like, you know, frankly, and they were saying, like, why did you stay in Ukraine? You know, just leave Ukraine, continue your life, why you need to suffer? And I told them, you know, we in the Parliament of Ukraine, myself personally, I never ever had this thought in my mind to escape the country and to continue my more comfort and secured life. 5:30 a.m. when the war started, I was in the Parliament, and all my colleagues were in the Parliament. And I realized if I will not come there, there might be not enough votes to vote for important decisions, for martial law, for, you know, we needed to change the mode of country running within a couple of hours, you know. We didn't know how it will go, but I realized this kind of huge responsibility on my shoulders, that Ukrainian voters, citizens of Ukraine, they trusted me on the elections, and I represent their vote. And I had literally that kind of, I may call it burden, of do my best to keep this country running. And the only one goal of the Parliament of Ninth Convocation is to preserve Ukraine as a sovereign, independent state. We do our best to be not the last parliament of independent Ukraine, but to have the next convocations. But MPs whom I was talking to, they told me, I was not born to become a military, like I'm a member of the parliament, and my family members as well. If they will invade us, I will just run to Paris, you know, backwards, because Paris is a bit backwards from that parliament. Why the hell I need to, you know, to deal with this mess? And this is the difference in attitude in terms of we stay and we will stay there in the current in Ukraine, no matter what happens. We'll do our best for our country to survive. So that's why, you know, whenever I was on different panels, I never heard this notion of, does Europe do something in order to prevent energy blackouts if you might happen this sometime in future? This is the reality that Ukraine is living through, because 2 days ago they were trying to bomb the water supply grid in Kiev to prevent Kiev, you know, Kiev is a 4 million city these days, you know, because a number of people from occupied territories, they moved to Kiev. So that's why these days, during the daytime, we have 4.5 million people, citizens in Kiev. And when you don't have water, you know, you understand the realities. So that's why on different security forums, panels, discussions in different parliaments, I never heard about any plan of Europe in case their energy infrastructure will be targeted. It was never discussed, at least I didn't hear this. And this is very much important, because this is not only about close sky missiles, this is about number of other aspects that help your citizens to survive, you know. That's why I think that there is a lot of things for Europe to learn from Ukraine. But unfortunately, what I observe these days, yes, there are a number of pro-European countries, pro-European citizens, but you will not need to have a lot of kindergartens and schools if you will have Russian army, you know, on your territory. So invest more into your own defense, invest, like, you know, just increase the budget on defense and all those, you know, it's not only about energy and water. We thought that, first of all, Russia, they will cut our telecom connection so that there will be no possibility for us to contact to each other. That's why the plan of Ukrainian parliament was, if well, we didn't know that the war will start, but if something will go wrong, we agreed, okay, 45 minutes and everyone is in the parliament, in our offices, because we have special landline there that we can communicate. So we thought that the first moment will be not the ballistic missile from the sky, but that the cell phone connection will disappear. And this Wednesday morning in Kiev, in the Parliament of Ukraine, we had a meeting with our acting minister on IT, on technology. And we were discussing with it because, you know, a number of times the telephone connection, it depends on electricity and on the, like, you know, telephone operators. So if there will be we had moments when we had already days when there were full blackouts of Ukraine. Odessa was recently 4 days, and in some areas 5 days in full blackouts. But we did our best for them to have telephone connection, and you know to have this possibility of you know additional generators, etc. But we do our best, and the government of Ukraine does its best. And I should say that we will not step back. The Parliament of Ukraine is not ready to vote for the deal that will lead to capitulation. We will support the deal that will be both prosperous for our nation, for our international partners, European partners. And I'm sure that together, stronger, together with the support of our partners, we will do it to the victorious peace.
Thank you so much. Dr. Brandstätter, I would like to ask you, do you think that everyone or every party in European Parliament is clear about what Europe is facing? Because in particular states, we are facing the voices who actually are far right, who trust disinformation. Maybe you can give us some overview how the debates look like in European Parliament, and how do you try to give everyone the feeling that, guys, we are in the war, not on the battlefield, but in cyber?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I can explain it quite easily. You have a broad majority to support Ukraine that goes from EPP, so Christian Democrats, etc., the Liberals, Green Party, very much, you know, very much, even the Germans, very much to support Ukraine, send weapons, etc., and the Social Democrats. And then you have the left-wing extremists. There are left-wing extremists, like from Germany, for instance, they say, no, Putin is not so bad. Then you go to the Baltic countries, you know, left-wing from the Baltic countries, they say, we have to be careful, and they support Ukraine. And it's similar on the right side, like the Polish Peace Party. They're very critical towards Russia because they know their history. And then you have AfD, not the Germans, and I can say that because it's proven partly. Some of them are paid by Russia, by this Medvedchuk, and so on and so forth. And the Austrian FPÖ, you know, it's really a shame, but I have to say it. They even have a contract with Putin parties, you know, a treaty with Putin party from 2016, where they promised each other they want, for instance, one of the parts which they write is they want to educate the young generation together in the sense of patriotism. So I quote it quite often when I say, because we know what Putin does with a sense of patriotism, he's killing his young generation. That's what FPÖ wants as well. But as I said, it's very difficult to explain it to some of our voters, because they say, it's not our war, it's nothing to do with us. But the next thing is, in the parliament, what we have is it's a special commission for more than a year already. It's called EUDS, the European Union Democracy Shield. And I'm the rapporteur for the Renew, for the Liberals. And we are just about to finish a report, will be a too long report, I have to admit, so we just tried to shorten it. And this work, 1 year, a lot of hearings, this was really very important because we understood partly at least how well organized Russian propaganda and disinformation is. And it's more than that. It's also sabotage. It's also their proof that some of the migration is organized in Africa by Wagner Group, bringing people to Belarus, for instance, then to try to get them to the border of Poland. Telegram, how Telegram is organized. So we learned all this. So we learned about disinformation. So it will be our job now, not only to write it in the report, but to explain it to the people in Western Europe. And there should be one more thing, which we are discussing with the Commission right now. It's a so-called Resilience Center. The Resilience Center should watch permanently what kind of disinformation is taking place and what we can do against it. And I think that's really important. There will be the question, are we good enough to have a strong resilience center, or will it be difficult with the Commission? We will see. But it's more than that. I think we have to be much better. I've been a really lifelong journalist, and I learned to tell stories. We are not good enough in telling stories. And of course, there are sad stories. I hardly in any newspaper I wrote the story about this. I read the story about this one family near Kharkiv, where the pregnant mother was killed. The pregnant mother, she survived, and the rest of the family was killed. This is one of the stories which we have to explain that Putin is not just having a war against another country, that he doesn't want just the Donbass or whatever. No, he wants to kill people, and that's only the beginning. And that's what we are discussing also in European Parliament, especially in this EUDS Commission, how we can be much better to explain this to the people here. I also did a meeting of organizations who try to get those stolen children back from Russia and to organize something that they can have some holidays in different places. And also the stories those children told, I heard them, and you can find them on YouTube. I don't really saw them in the normal media, and I try to consume a lot of media. We still, and I think that's really a problem in this war from Russia. It's still a war between Russia and Ukraine. No, it's not only a war between Russia and Ukraine. I already quoted Dugin, and I could quote other people. Like Surkov, and they really say, no, we have to take part after part. We have to get the Baltic countries back, and so on. And that it's so difficult to explain it, but it will be our job to explain it, and also using the social media. And I come back to that what Marietje Schaake said about the CEOs of the US companies, because here we really see how they play together. The way those social media, Meta, Facebook, X, etc., are organized, there is no responsibility at all. As an editor-in-chief, I know what it meant to have responsibility for a medium. They say you can say whatever you want, and you can do whatever you want. And when we decided on our DSA, the Digital Service Act, Digital Security Act, now Trump and the Americans say, no, this is, and also AfD, the right-wing people say that's censorship. That's not censorship. That is the only way for a secure basis also in social media. And that is also something where Europe has to be more active, more strict, and explain also to the public, no, it's not censorship at all. But we need a secure basis also in the social media. So there are many things at the same time, and as it was said already, of course we have to cooperate with the Ukrainians, take all their stories, but also their experience, not only as the Danes, it's the Danish model now as far as the production of defense material is concerned, but also as far as information is concerned.
Thank you. I would like to open the panel after I ask you the second question. So responsibility, we heard right now, What responsibilities actually do platforms and private tech companies have in preventing disinformation and hybrid attacks?
So picking up on the previous speaker, I think it's really important to understand that actually the narrative about the Trump administration and the CEOs protecting free speech is disinformation. Because there's not a bigger censorship process going on than in the United States, where, you know, even Plato is banned at a university because it references a relationship between two men. Okay, so this is also propaganda, and it's working because everybody loves free speech. I love free speech. And so it makes sense that it's attractive when there's somebody who stands up and says, I'm protecting free speech, that people think, oh, well, that's about me because I care about this too. Except when you look at what they do, and this is what you mentioned, look at what they do, not listen to what they say, you'll hear a completely different story. So what are the responsibilities of the tech platforms? I think we can look at this at a number of levels. If you ask me morally, I think they have a lot of responsibility. It's not the responsibility they're taking. Legally, they have some responsibilities. But it's more about reporting how they deal with dangerous information, because in fact, they're not only monopolists in the market, they're also monopolists on information. So they know much more, first of all, about all of us, because they have data profiles that reveal almost everything, and that also reveal our weak spots that can be exploited to sell something online, you know, bring a sale to your attention when you're most vulnerable to purchasing, but also, of course, to understand how somebody's behavior, vote, fear, can be exploited. And we are only beginning in Europe to hold these platforms to real account. And you can already tell from the response by the Trump administration and some of the CEOs of the tech platforms that they are terrified of the Digital Services Act for one particular reason. And that reason is transparency obligations. Because once we know better how the algorithms work, we will be able to understand better whether or not we're manipulated, whether we're overestimating or underestimating how these algorithms steer information. And that is, of course, the secret sauce that they want to keep to themselves. The argument is it's a business secret, but the reality is it's also a power secret. And I think that we really have to understand this. So I wish we would be more clear-eyed about the way in which technology is not only a shiny object that we all want to use, but it's a tool to manipulate people. And that's not only when it's abused, it's also when it's used these days. Not only when it's abused, it's also when it's used these days. And so we have to learn, all of us, and dig for more understanding on all layers of how communication works. And ultimately, we find that besides the regulations, we have to start building alternatives. Because we have to have much more control over the way in which we connect, communicate, learn, get access to the news, get access to our government information. And I think that that will make Europe more resilient as a whole. I don't think the situation of Europe is as dire as some of it has been suggested here. Taxpayer money is going to Ukraine. It's a good spend. But it's been supported, as colleague Brandstætter said, by a broad majority, even if it's been tough, because the consequences of Russia's actions have cost Europeans in the form of energy, in the form of sanctions, and in the form of investing in defense. I think, again, it's a good investment, but it's a story that politicians have to keep, telling their voters over and over again. I also think in that sense, this moment between the newest war in Ukraine, and I agree it's been, Russia's aggression has been going on for much longer, but the 4-year war in Ukraine that we're talking about now have been a wake-up call to Europeans. Add to that the betrayal of the Americans in the transatlantic relation has been a wake-up call for Europeans. So if there was ever a moment that we could use to inform ourselves better and to understand better what's at stake, it's now. But it's not the kind of information and understanding that you find if you just keep scrolling on the stuff that is presented to you by, the platforms and the incentives that they have. You have to dig deeper. Thank you for doing that. I really have to run because I have another meeting, and I do apologize, but there was no way I could not have that, and it's also significant. But this has been a wonderful meeting. I know you will continue this discussion, so apologies. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. This applause is for you. And at this stage, I would like to give you a chance to ask questions to our panelists. There is a microphone. Please.
And regarding time constraints, I ask you to be as brief as possible with your questions.
We have here, please, the first one, and afterwards, I will give you the word.
Hello, thank you. I serve as a disinformation expert to a German NGO called Fellows for Europe, which is pro-Ukrainian, pro-democracy. And my diagnosis is the following, that the German information space is very much polluted with Russian narratives. We see industrial scale disinformation. AI will only make it worse. And all the methods we use to counter disinformation, actually, if we are honest, they fail. So media literacy, so the citizen should do it alone, fails. Debunking comes too late. Pre-bunking is not scalable. So the question is, if we accept that these methods fail, we should try something else. And we should try something, and I would be curious whether you have similar things in Ukraine already. We should try something that was very successful in actually civilizing street traffic. We were using specific laws that had automated fines against small deviations of the law. So people, if you park your car wrong, you automatically get a ticket, more or less automatically. I mean, it's not electronically automatic, but it's more or less, you get the ticket. And that's the important point. And if we want to fight industrial scale disinformation, we actually need to use scalable methods. So on top of more regulation on social networks in terms of fairness, transparency, open sourcing all the code, we also need to penalize each single distributed disinformation, and not only penalize the social networks, but also penalize the citizens that actually distribute that, if it is citizens and not bots. Yeah? But that's important. It's doable. We have seen that it works in street traffic. And I can promise you one thing. If we don't do that, we will lose this information war. And please explain me what you are doing with this regard in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this question, and I want to thank you also for doing your great job, because we talk a lot about what Ukrainian experience is, but I really don't want to be the person sitting here on the stage and mentoring you all what to do and how to do great, because we have made a lot of mistakes ourselves as Ukrainians. So thank you very much to all of you for your support to Ukraine, for organizing this, for talking about this. This is really very important. How Ukraine overcame this, we haven't, and I don't think there is a chance to overcome it. It's easier to beat the disinformation when you have missiles and drones flying over your flats and roofs. I don't really think this is the way we want to take, and I hope it never happens in Germany. But even now, the massive disinformation is going on, right? So it's not about Russians and Ukrainians being the same nation, because that's just impossible. But what the Russians would do, for example, is to say in Odessa, well, you know why you don't have 5 days of electricity? It's because they give all electricity to Lviv in the western part of Ukraine, or it's because they're just selling electricity to the European countries, etc., etc. So it goes on. What I would say is somehow efficient is, of course, it's all about critical thinking of your people and your education system from the very beginning. If we look at the most successful models, I would say this is Finland, this is Sweden, the Nordic Baltic friends who have been really successful in this. starting from, I don't know, kindergarten, starting from families even, starting from the university courses. You talk about how to consume information, how to fact check, how to challenge everything. With AI, with deep fakes, with AI-generated pictures and videos, it's basically important to debunk anything because you can't tell one from another. So it's all about the critical thinking still. And I also think it's important not only to limit ourselves to disinformation and propaganda online on social platforms, it's way, way broader how the Russians should do it. Look at the cultural associations. Россотрудничество is still all over the places in so many European countries. Russian academia, I'm sorry to say that, but I need to say that. So many people who left Russia either because of sanctions or because of mobilization and they didn't want to be mobilized, or because they had some other better job offers to do in Europe by their patrons in Russia. And when I talk to someone in so many universities in Germany, but also outside of Germany, and these are kind of a good Russians, and I realize it's good when someone doesn't support the war, but I question what is the reason for them being there, reframing Putin's narratives and then basically saying the same thing with a liberal flair all over it. Not all of them perhaps, but it goes, you know, much, much deeper into society. So when you only hear it somewhere on TV or read it on Facebook, it's one thing. When you have it all over the places, festivals, musics, Olympics, you know, theater, singers, etc., 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 and the information space is polluted. That's, I think, where you can still take some actions and stop at least inviting more and more Russian propagandists under whatever covers they may come into Europe and giving them the platforms for spreading those narratives. But otherwise, and I can say this as a person, by the way, speaking about information warfare, whose personal data was leaked to Russian Telegram channels, who got intimidated, who had to change passport, because there is also a way of information warfare when you just leak the information of experts, military people, civil activists, and then you just target them, etc., etc., but it's a never-ending story. So the short answer, there is no recipe, but it's a very multi-layered, multi-domain fight against the influence.
Thank you so much. Maybe.
So to follow up?
Yes, please. And a bit quick answer so that we can give them also the floor. Thank you.
In Ukraine, we closed and sanctioned first and then closed a number of Russian-sponsored TV channels. Yes, at the beginning, everyone was telling what about freedom of speech, democracy. Well, when it's Russian source, direct one, and all the intelligent information is telling about this is Russian propaganda TV channels, and there were 4 of them, we closed them. And to tell the truth, this is very much different reality without narratives, this Russian one, so it helps. And there are a number of Russian-sponsored TV English-speaking channels in Europe. Of course, citizens of European Union member states, they watch it and they consume information, let's say, that was provided there by the Russian authority, but masked to the European news, etc. So if you know that this is a TV channel linked to Russia, do your best to close it, or ask your politicians. Actually, citizens, the electorate, they can influence a lot to the members of the parliament. So that's why all of you are voters in your countries. You have MPs in your districts, and you can really write a petition. You can write an email. They will have to respond. They will have to take your point of view. If there will be many of you doing the same thing, there should be reaction of the person who was elected in your state. Apart from the closing of TV channels, for example, me personally, it might be shocking reality for you, but I don't have Telegram. President of Ukraine doesn't have Telegram. Speaker of the Parliament of Ukraine doesn't have Telegram. And this is not because they are not aware of some information. Trust me, they are aware of all the information. But Telegram, is like you have anonymous channels there. You cannot actually track who puts the sources, who puts this, information there. And I'm very much happy that I don't have it because I trust only to the governmental-based channels, to the website of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Parliament of Ukraine, Cabinet of Ministers. So you can rely on the information that is produced by the government, and do not rely on anonymous channels that you might think, oh, it seems to be pro-Ukrainian, but you will feel, number of channels, they put this information in the way that you are always nervous. The degree of this kind of being always in a special stressful mode doesn't help you, to operate daily life in Ukraine, actually. And I should say that to trust the governmental sources, the verified sources. Government of Ukraine, they produced special platforms, special websites where they put information both in English and Ukrainian. It is advertised everywhere so that people, both Ukrainian speaking and English speaking, they can check there, verify information. Because a number of times when I'm in the Parliament of Ukraine and then I get news from somewhere and they presume it from very much different angle of view, as if I was not there today, because that was not the case. So that's why just have a look at the trust-based sources, but not at the anonymous channels, and especially any channels that have direct links to Russia.
Thank you so much. Please. Thank you.
Andrei Novak, Alliance for European Security, Berlin. I think, in order to help some of those notions that are used in disinformation and in the propaganda narratives and so on, I think we need to look at the broader picture first of all, and then look how we frame responses. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I think we have this global conflict now between aggressive autocracies attacking democracy per se, and that plays out in a number of theaters, including Ukraine, including Europe, and of course the Kremlin is playing divide et impera, divide and conquer, and trying to split our societies, our democracy wherever he can. And two common points. One is the free speech one that was mentioned. I think that we have to be careful not to conflate free speech and democracy. They're not the same. And when free speech is weaponized against democracy, and you have to make a choice between free speech and democracy, choose democracy. That's wehrhafte Demokratie in German should be. Yeah. And the second is the left-right split. We are used to arguing between some identify as left, some identify as right. But really, this is not that relevant anymore. Relevant is, are you pro-democracy or are you pro-autocracy? That's the relevant split.
Thank you. So, Dr. Brandstätter, would you like to comment this kind of statement?
Yeah, it's. I tried to explain it before. We are an open society. And of course, and we will not change that. We must not change that. And freedom is so important for us. We have to explain, and that's a split in the society, and that's what I really would try to get those people back who believe Putin, who believe those AfD and FPÖ and all those people. We have to try to convince them that those Putin, AfD, they don't want a free society. Everything, sometimes even in this commission, there's a woman from AfD, and once we were discussing it, and she was shouting, "Oh, Soros, he doesn't allow that we say certain things." And I said, "Okay, what is it what you would like to say, and you're not allowed to say?" And then she didn't say anything more. So I think this is the point. And I said, go to the Kremlin with a white sheet of paper. That would be enough that you throw you into jail. And here you can shout Soros, you can shout whatever you want, and that's it, and no problem. what I read also in the social media is that we live in EU DSSR. You know, that it's not a democracy anymore. Of course, COVID was part of it, but again, where you see that the populists really have an easier life. As soon as we had the corona, we had COVID, the leader of the FPÖ, the right-wing party in Austria, said we need immediate lockdown. After 2 weeks, I don't know, the government made a lockdown, and after 4 weeks, the same person quickly said, what a catastrophe, you never should have done a lockdown. And for us, it's difficult to explain, you know, the same guy who wanted lockdown, now he doesn't want it, because, and then next point, corruption, you know, we didn't talk about corruption. So they say everybody in Ukraine is corrupt. And then I say, no, look, your party, the last government where your party was, it fell down because of corruption. And then people say, everybody is corrupt. So it's so difficult, and that's part of the social media. You don't find the facts anymore. You know, it was already in last Trump government when this one lady said there are alternative facts. We don't have a basis, a common basis. What are the facts? And this is something which we have to try to get back. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be necessary if we want to remain this open society.
Thank you so much. And I would say let's take one final and very quick question.
Thank you for your talk. This is kind of directed again to Dr. Brandstätter, but I'm happy for everyone to answer.
A bit loud, please.
Sorry, with the mic as well. Basically, like the issue of like the Trojan horse of American tech companies, I'm wondering, do you think, like, of course, the power comes from the network effect that everyone's on these social media platforms, so you have to be on these social media platforms. If, for example, you don't think that they are good and you leave them, then you only leave parties like the AfD who stay on it and then kind of continues. Do you think that an outright ban could help kind of speed up European providers, because then the network effects kind of gives them like a protectionist advantage, essentially? Thank you.
No, I think we have the DSA, and we have to do everything. You know, it's really strange. The Americans say, you know, you have to watch our laws. It's right. If BMW wants to send European cars to America, they have to watch the American laws. But on the other hand, if they have their platforms here, they have to watch our laws. That's very easy. Of course, there's always the question, why is there no European platform? And there's always, and who is going to do it? But I don't think that many people feel that X or Meta is American. It's the place they speak it. They write in German, you know, or in Italian, or whatever language. For them, it's their social media home. So we have to, and Marietje Schaake said it before, we have to watch the algorithm. That's the point, because if they say there's free speech, no, there is no free speech, because if I write something on X which they don't like, you will not find it, because the algorithm doesn't show it to you. And this is something where we have to be way more strict. I think this is the job of the European Commission. And you saw X has to pay now 120 million or so. And there was already a big discussion in America. How can the Europeans put some fine on us? Of course we can, and we have to continue doing that. And they will have to understand it. There has to be responsibility. I say it again. You know, a platform, or it's a product also, without responsibility. We would not discuss if it's necessary. If you want to sell milk, it's got to be milk, you know, and it's not, there's no poison in it. And everybody say, yes, of course. But we allow it that there's poison on social media? No, we did it for too long time. And now we have to stop that, and we have to be very strict.
Thank you so much. Ms. Mykhailiuk, before I close the panel discussion, I would like to give you the last word to give us some statement, to share with us some final thoughts. So you have 30 seconds for it. Please.
Ukraine is ready to defend Europe, and Ukrainian army is ready to defend the NATO member states, and we prove already that we will be an added value to both European and Atlantic alliances or unions. So that's why I do hope that one day we will join both European community, European Union, and the NATO alliance, and you will see the real added value of Ukraine. And we are very much grateful on behalf of the people of Ukraine and on behalf of the Parliament of Ukraine to every single piece of support that was provided to us, because we do understand that just bravery of our soldiers, being naked in front of Russian army is not enough. But thanks to the fact that all European Union nations and all the democratic nations around the world helped us with different means of support, we are still there, free, independent, and sovereign, and we will continue to be so. So thank you a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who attended this event. I would like to thank also Mike Schnierer from Thomas Della Foundation, Konstantin Grott from Friedrich Naumann Foundation, and Dmitry Shevchenko from Ukrainian Free University. Thank you. Huge thank you to our speakers. And now I would like to invite you to give some small presents to our speakers.
Thank you very much.
Power of light. Let's stay positive, and Slava Ukraini. Thank you. Please, Konstantin.
And you're now all cordially invited to reception on the ground floor. Have a nice evening, Slava Ukraini.